What's going on, everyone? It's your boy Chucky from Shook Earth Gaming, my new gaming channel, and today we are reviewing the new Resident Evil Village DLC that's called Shadows of Rose. It's a little bit of a story-oriented campaign. It's like 3 hours long. It mostly persists of going through levels that we're familiar with in a new way. So we're inside the mold in this one. It's like psychological horror type things what they're going for a personal story about Rose. Turns out we're going to be covering spoilers in this video because it's going to be a breakdown. I have my gameplay footage and we're just going to go through it as I give my review on the game. So I'll kind of go in order as far as the gameplay goes. So if you don't want to see the ending, you can sign off the video before then. I just want to give you a preemptive spoiler warning that we'll be covering everything just to let you guys know. But my impressions of it overall are pretty good. It's not going to be like high praise or anything, but it's a really it's a fun DLC. I enjoyed it overall. The story is the key point. That's what people are going to remember. That's what people are talking about. It's all about the narrative. So if you're interested in that side of Resident Evil, this is for you. As far as gameplay, it's a bit more of a stripped back version of the survival horror that we got in Resident Evil Village. Stripped back as in there's less weapons, there's no upgrades. It's a shorter campaign, obviously, so you don't get into more of that stuff. There's less collectibles. It's a little bit more streamlined. There's like less resources at the same time. So it's like you have to avoid enemies a lot of the game, especially if you're on the harder difficulty. So it's an emphasis on the survival horror aspect for the first half of it. There's a lot of dark areas and a lot of moody stuff like that. So good use of the environments and a lot of familiar territory. I honestly like revisiting it in a new way. It's cool to me, and they add something new to it by making the mold kind of take over the whole world. And it's a little bit psychological horror in that there's some surreal transitions and stuff like that happening. So I did enjoy this game quite a bit. The biggest combat thing is the boss battle at the end. We'll get to that once we're breaking it down, but these are just my overall thoughts right now. I enjoyed the final boss fight because you get to unlock some abilities as Rose. Of course, we knew she had some sort of Mega Mycete related powers going into this DLC here. So that's pretty much my just broad overview of my thoughts on the game. Highly enjoyed it. Now we're just going to break down the individual game. I will say that it does feel like a bit of a rehash, of course, because there's a lot of repetition. Before we get into the breakdown, there's the story beats that we get are also kind of repetitive. There's like a big reveal that feels like a similar reveal to Village. So, and the last cutscene, I mean, I might as well just tell you right up front, is the cutscene for the post-credit scene that we saw in the original game. So it turns out this is a prequel to that, which is cool, and we see the last cutscene in a new way. But I was really hoping they would take that a little bit further, maybe show us a little bit of a teaser of what happens after that scene. Of course, that scene ended as a teaser in the original game with somebody walking to the car, and that's happening again as I watch this whole cutscene over again. And I'm wondering if we're going to see maybe who that is, or maybe we'll get a little bit of a preview of something else. But that's how the game ends. So it was a little bit disappointing in that part. But we'll get to the individual storyline as we get to the end. I don't want to spoil too much up front. Let's just get into the breakdown. So at the beginning, we have a mysterious scientist guy who has he's pretending to, I'm just checking in on Rose, and it's a bit weird that I mean, I feel like Rose is constantly evading Chris and stuff. So I would have liked to see a bit more of we find out certain things about who this person is later, and I would have liked to see some of the planning because this secret meeting that they have, I mean, she's got to be like, they have to be following her, right? Because they know they would treat her similar to how they were treating Ethan and Mia at the beginning of Village, right? So they have eyes on her, they know what she's doing. So I imagine that it might be hard with her one-on-one, not to mention the fact that she's 16 years old or something. So meeting with a teenage girl, a little bit suspect outset. So I didn't trust this guy right away. And he brings her to this lab where he's got this mega mycete, and there's something in there that can help her get rid of her powers. And the mold takes people's memories, and there's kind of a consciousness going on with it. So these are all story beats. I like the concept, and they really step up kind of the writing, and I would say the acting is particularly good. Like Rose's actor is very emotive, and the facial animations are really good. The cutscenes are a standout in this game. And of course, the perspective. I forgot to even mention the perspective at the beginning, because it's such a natural thing for Resident Evil that it once it happens, it's like, yeah, it's a third-person game. It really just didn't. It kind of felt like a non-event. I don't know that that's a negative thing. It just like now that I see Resident Evil Village in third person, I've yet to go back and play the original campaign, but it just feels right, you know? So I was kind of resistant to it. The first person perspective works very well also, but, you know, I like our beginning here, and we're in a spooky basement again, using the castle very well. We spend a lot of time in the castle, and the castle, of course, is one of my favorite environments from Village, so I'm happy to revisit that again. We spent less time in the basement than I was expecting. I would have thought a little bit more, but it's kind of cool that, you know, we see a lot of clones of her. It turns out that somebody's been making clones, and, you know, there's a voice helping her, and they're writing text on the environment. I kind of like that concept, keeps it in the psychological space. You know, I honestly would have liked them to see them go a little further with the psychological aspect, just in sense of the environment changing. You know, you turn around, you're somewhere you don't expect, you know, some more of that surreal stuff. Instead, they went for a bit more conventional level design, which feels a bit better for Resident Evil. But, you know, so we're keeping in the confines of the Resident Evil formula. We're not going too far outside of that. I would have actually been okay with them going a little bit outside of that and trying something a bit more, you know, like PT style or something like that, or what's another good game like that? Like Layers of Fear, where you turn around, there's things behind you all of a sudden. So they could have gone a lot of ways with it, but I like what they did. I mean, it's a cinematic reuse of the environments we've already been through, and the mold concept is really cool. So basically, mold's overgrowing everything, and we get new mold creatures, but they're not the same as the ones from Resident Evil 7. So that's great. You know, I might as well play the footage since we have it up on screen anyways. But yeah, I like the tight quarters as well. It's like a more of a traditional survival horror game. You know, it almost has like an indie feel to it, because I'm constantly trying to get past it. Now, Rose has the ability at this point to kind of put the enemies in stasis mode if you play Dead Space. So that's very useful, obviously, but I'm trying to conserve resources, so I'm getting myself killed by trying to get around them, because there's so many. I'm like, do I really want to shoot all of them and use all... Like, these... I like this type of gameplay, and that's not so much what Village was, so it's kind of cool to see a stripped back Resident Evil with that. And, of course, there's a lot of unlocking mechanics with this gross-looking mold stuff. So, yeah, I died a fair bit, but I played it on the hardest difficulty. We'll get a little bit back to the difficulty later, because the balancing was it's tough for the hardest difficulty. But I was like, oh, it's not it's not Village of Shadows, because there's no Village of Shadows difficulty in this game mode for whatever reason. But that's probably because it's not as combat oriented. You see, I got swallowed up here. Some of the death scenes were cool. So I'm liking the spooky designs. I love the mold, and I have to do things where I have to lure enemies a certain direction and then duck them and dodge them and stuff like that. I like this kind of survival horror stuff. You know, Village is more of an action game. You kind of kill most of the enemies you come across, unless you're speed running or something like that. So, you know, and I like that about it. The Village was a great mixture of action and horror, but here we got something that just focuses more on the horror side of things until you get to the final boss battle and stuff like that. Then it's more of a straight action game. But yeah, so I'm enjoying this formula and revisiting the castle. The layouts of everything. They have new puzzles for certain unlocks. You know, there's a painting puzzle that was cool. They had the statues when you have to rotate the statues. This time it's a new puzzle, so I'm glad they put the new riddles in. The writing is particularly good. The dialogue is great, like I already said. So this is one of the more personable and psychological Resident Evil games that we've gotten. So, you know, I like getting more into the characterization when it comes to Resident Evil games. So, you know, that's to be honest, as a fan, somebody who loves it, it's a little bit of a weak point, historically speaking. Just in terms of you know, writing quality, it's going for more of the B movie. It's doing different things, but I like to see a little bit more characterization and complexity when it comes to that. So it's nothing like, you know, Shakespearean, but it's really a cool it's a cool story. I enjoy the story. Here's the new puzzles, like I said, and we spend, you know, maybe half of the game inside the castle, which the castle, I almost wish we got some new areas, but I understand it's DLC. They're trying to reuse assets that they already have in a new and interesting way, and I think they did that. The castle section ends with a really cool boss fight, I would say. I enjoyed that. That might be one of my favorite parts. The one thing that's cool I've almost forgot to mention is the villain of the first part in the castle is the Duke, who also turns out to be a clone. But he's kind of incorporating some aspects of characters from Resident Evil 7. So there's some elements of Resident Evil 7 Biohazard in this game, and I like to see that coming all together and into this final chapter for Village. So we have, you know, Evelyn shows up in this game as well. We have like the phone. There's a phone call, and then you hear Evelyn talking. So that's straight from Resident Evil 7. And the Duke takes aspects of the son character from Resident Evil 7, whose name I'm forgetting right now, but he's the guy who, like, in the DLC that was free with Chris, he's like, he has all the traps set up, and the happy birthday thing in the main campaign and stuff like that. So I really like, I like bringing those subtle things in. This kind of countdown thing, you have a certain amount of time to kill the right mold thing. That's really cool. I enjoyed this segment. So there's some really good cinematic segments, and the camera, like I said, it's completely natural in third person. It didn't feel like a barrier at all. There are a couple times where the environment collided with it. You know, you're by a wall, and this is a game where everything is close quarters. So I was really a bit worried that there might be a lot of camera issues in the third person, but that's not really the case with this, thankfully. So yeah, basically you have to go on a couple different treks when it comes to the castle. You go to get a new key or an unlock item, and that's how the game is structured. And you have these conversations with, spoiler alert, I think I'm just gonna spoil this part, so that if you want to, it's pretty obvious though. That's the thing. That's the point I have to make, is that the text on the wall and stuff, the voice, he gives himself the name Michael at the beginning, but it's actually, of course, Ethan, and you see him embodied later, which is really great to see. I like giving his character that last breath. So this is almost like a final goodbye to Ethan. And I still think this game is setting up Rose to be the next protagonist. They said some things contrary to that in in an interview, that this was the end for the Winters and Rose's chapter was done. This to me feels like it still feels like setting up Rose. So I'll believe that when I see it. But I like the character. Of course, there's that thing in the air that she wants to get her powers taken away. That's her motivation, and delving into, you know, her upbringing. the fact that she's fatherless and she has like this weird oozing mold stuff that comes out of her in school. People make fun of her for that, call her a freak and stuff. So it's kind of a typical, like bullying scenario. So it's not anything that we haven't seen before, but I like the element and having that as the psychological core and rooting it all in the story with Ethan and his sacrifice at the end. I think was really smart. So I like this final boss battle thing, and you have a very small environment. You're constantly dodging. You have to stasis enemies and run past them. And there's a big guy that tanks a lot of ammo, and you use pretty much all your resources. So it's a pretty well balanced game. Like I said, you can't get away with just killing everything. So at least in the hardcore mode that I played. So it's a solid. I thought this was the end of the game. I was like, okay, this is the final boss battle. It's pretty cool. But the game does go on for a bit after that. And thankfully it did, because we go to the Benevito house. And I really like this. This was one of the standout parts of the original Village. That was just a horror-focused segment. No combat or anything like that. It's just, it's a very linear experience, and it doesn't really have much variety in it. So it was really cool to see a different version of that. So we have, of course, it's rooted in the psychology instead of Ethan, and having his relationship with Mia be a kind of the focus of the hallucinations. Now we have her focus of the hallucinations is her experiences at school, and you see the drawings on the wall and the childlike setting. So I really think it was very smart, and again, a great use of the same story beats basically as the last one, but there's a really clever twist instead of this freaky baby thing, which I think still takes the cake as scarier ultimately than what we get here. But we get a really unique segment. I do like the puzzles with the figurines and stuff like that. That's cool. But I love this segment with these statues. They must have got this idea from Doctor Who, because there's these statues in Doctor Who that when you aren't looking at them, they appear and move around like how these statues do. So I love seeing that concept in a video game. It's really smart, and they had some twists on it. Of course, basically, it's designed so that the first time you play it, if you don't know what to expect, you're going to die. See, that you saw right there, some of the collision issues. And it was especially apparent here in the segment where you have to walk backwards for a lot of it. Because if I turned around, she would kill me. So, instead of the baby thing, we have something new, something surprising. And it is familiar because it's the Mia statue or the statue I think is supposed to remind you of Mia from the original Village. So I really like reusing that segment right there. And then there's eventually multiples of them. It's really, really cool. I think that segment was stellar. Absolutely stellar. And then here we get a kind of, this is where the furthest they went with weird, trippy stuff. We get a stealth-oriented segment where you are shrunk down as Rose, and you're really tiny. You're like a little toy. Kind of felt like a Toy Story thing again, dealing with a lot of the similar themes. We have her bullies embodied as dolls, and it does fit with the theme. I like that this is as weird as they went. The stealth and stuff like that, it felt like, oh, they played Little Nightmares, and they wanted to incorporate that a little bit. It doesn't, I don't know, it didn't rock my world with the stealth aspect. It was just a very basic stealth thing. Something to break it up. Something new. I don't think Village really had much stealth in it from what I remember. So, aesthetically, I think it's cool, and I'm into the idea. But, the gameplay experience it's kind of meh to me. I wasn't all that into it. But, I mean, it looks cool, and I like the idea. I like what they're trying to do. Now, I'm going to get into some of the balancing stuff. So I was playing in a hardcore mode, so I had to do this part a bunch of times. Because it's designed to be tough for a second playthrough. So I wouldn't recommend hardcore for a first playthrough, because this big chase scene here, that it's a lot more intense if you don't have to repeat it a bunch of times. And it's designed so that these things are a lot faster, so you have to do certain actions. It gives you less leeway. So just long story short, I'm the kind of person who usually plays games on hard mode, especially horror games, because I'm pretty skilled at them and I'm used to playing them. I know how they work. But this one, you have a little bit more, just for scripted segments like this that you might fail at for the first time. It's not going to be as fun of a cinematic experience if you play it on hardcore mode. So we got a new herb in this one. It came up on screen, so might as well transition to that. Because, of course, our stasis ability needs to be charged, so we got a new white herb, and that's cool. So I I almost wanted something a little bit more out of that with combining it with other herbs, but I didn't end up doing that, which is fine. Or they could have used that in a crafting recipe. That could have been cool. But there aren't enough weapons in this game. They kept it pretty simple and focused on the story aspect. So, there are parts of this that I like once you unlock the ability to kill the dolls. You get this segment with a big doll that you can't kill that follows you, so you have to make your choice, and I made all that choices on the fly. So another example of how it's more fun if you get by the seat of your pants and play on standard instead of failing it multiple times. But we've discussed that enough. So I like this segment. It's not my favorite part. I like that they went weird with it. I almost wish there was a bit more weird stuff like that. But the chase scene and the stealth scene, it's a nice way to break it up, but I'm not that into the gameplay aspect. This is specifically the scene that drove me nuts, because this lady, you have to stun her at least once. She comes running in from the side there, and I'm assuming on other difficulties it's a little easier to get away. So you have to turn around, stun her, and then run more, but she can catch up to you again if you dilly-dally a little bit too much. So that part in particular I had to redo a bunch of times, as you can see here. And then we visit the house from the beginning, and that's cool to see. And I really like all the things that they wrote, the letters and stuff. Well worth the time to read everything that they put, because like I said, the story is the main aspect. Here's another scene that I had to redo a bunch of times because I'm playing it on a difficulty mode that's made for the second playthrough. That was me checking if I could skip this cutscene because I've seen it so many times at this point. But I like bringing Evelyn back too, closing that kind of chapter, and that kind of leads us into Evelyn's the next boss battle for this portion here, and then you have kind of a showdown with her in the house, which is cool, and she has some blasts, and you have to duck behind things. This part, I liked having something a little bit different with dodging attacks. So I liked, we never had a fight in here. The fight that you have here is just you have to find a doll 3 times. So I liked having an actual combat-ish segment here in this house, and I will say this repeated motif of her diving underwater that keeps coming up is really cool. I like going deeper and deeper into the dream. The first one that they show with the audio of her getting bullied playing in the background, I felt was a little much. It was kind of a little bit cheesy for me, but I can look past it. So, and then we get the big reveals at the end, and it turns out that, it was Ethan. We learn it was Ethan the whole time. And Ethan, again, steps in to save Rose from Evelyn and throws her and makes her jump, basically. So that's the most obvious reveal of all time. I knew it right away. I'm pretty sure everybody's going to see that coming. So, it's a non-twist. And there's a couple non-twists in this ending, but I love this vision here. We go to the village for the first time. I expected to spend a little bit more time in the village. That didn't end up happening, and that's okay. I would have liked to go back to the village more, but I liked having it lead to Miranda ultimately. So Miranda being the big bad that um, is the final boss battle and everything, it feels really repetitive. And they found a way. It makes sense. Ultimately, they wrote it in such a way that Miranda, this is kind of like her final form inside the mold. This is her memories battling Ethan's memories. Love the concept. It adds kind of a new meaning to Ethan's sacrifice at the end of Village, that he specifically stayed behind because he knew that some part of Miranda was going to survive. So in some ways, it makes the ending of Village make a bit more sense. So I like that. And then we see this birthing canal thing where copies of Rose are being born, and then we find out that Miranda's been cloning Rose, which makes perfect sense because she thinks that Rose is this perfect vessel for her daughter, Evelyn. So again, tying it all into the family theme, and we have the Miranda lineage versus Ethan's lineage. So I love the framing, and again, great writing here. And then we get our final boss battle, in which we get new abilities and powers and stuff. I like the creepiness of the cave leading up to it. So that was pretty cool. And we're going to pull up the ending here. So now you guys got to understand that I was playing this game without the tutorial pop-ups coming up. So the thing, when I played the first Village many times, I must have played it 4 or 5 times. So I turned off the tutorial bubbles that tell you how to play the game, because I'm like, I know how to play it already. That came back to bite me here. So I had to fight this final boss battle a lot more times than I should have, because I didn't know about Rose's abilities that you unlock in this battle. So you get a bunch of new abilities. Like, I'm like, how am I supposed to dodge these attacks? It turns out Rose has a special dodge now. So the boss battle, I like the experience of figuring out what to do. Once I knew what to do, it was actually a bit easy for the hardcore difficulty, considering how hard some of the other stuff was. I found it actually, they could have dialed it up a bit more. But that was before I figured out that I could dodge like that. I was going absolutely nuts. I was like, this is way too hard. How are you supposed to beat this? But once I knew how to do it, it's not too bad. And you can also like throw a root down, kind of like a pillar of mold that you slap her with. So it's similar to the final boss battle with her, but they know that they need a new mechanic. So there's we have this stage where we go into this dark world and we have to dodge her and stuff, but it's a new version of that where it's her tunneling. So I like having the new powers. Control wise, I will say it makes the B button a little overloaded, because the B button usually is just the 180-degree turn. I love that that's a shortcut. Maybe a lot of people don't use it. I use it constantly playing these Resident Evil games, so I really like that that's the thing. But the dodges are left and right, and I was constantly trying to dodge forward and back and all of that. You can't do it. You can only do lateral dodging, which is fine. I just like kept accidentally turning around and getting stun locked because I would get hit in the back. Again, it's my fault, but it overloads the B button a little bit, because you have to press B and forward to do the attack that you slap her with the pillar of mold. So it overloads the B button a little bit, and I was missing in this game a block button. There's no block button. Again, it's that minimal combat, so they want that tight experience with really close quarters combat, and they want it to drive up that intensity, so they don't really want you to have that ability to dodge. I think it makes sense for the rest of the game, or not dodge, block. There's no block in this, but they bring it back for this, so you absorb the blast that she sends at you. And now I was trying to do strats from the OG Miranda boss battle where you shoot the balls above her heads, but here you don't do that. So I thought this boss battle was pretty good. It's not, I don't think it's as good as the boss battles in the original game, but I enjoyed it. It was a good experience. I will say just the idea of Miranda being behind everything, like I said, it's already a little bit repetitive, So we've been here, done that to a certain extent. It feels like, just rehashing the final climax and just having another stage of that, which we basically have the same ending we had before, except now we know a little bit more of why Rose was, threatening the guy at the end of the original game, saying she has all these powers Chris doesn't know about, and now we know what she means. So I like getting that backstory. That almost made it feel like this was planned all along. So we'll play out this final scene here. I like seeing Ethan again, and I think it was cool. They made it so that we don't see Ethan's face. That's a stylistic choice that they made. It's a first-person game, so we haven't really seen Ethan's face. Even in promotional marketing material, they usually put his face in shadow. So they decided to preserve that here. And, to me, it's not a situation like Master Chief in Halo where if you show his face, it kind of undercuts a lot of the storytelling before and it makes him different as a character. Here, I don't think it would have hurt to see Ethan's face. I think we could have seen Ethan's face and it would have been fine. I don't really have an emotional attachment to not seeing his face. I think having this final payoff, if you're going to go through all this to really bring back this bring an ending to the Rose and Ethan story, I would have liked to see the emotional connection on his face. I would have liked to see. That's the closest you get is seeing him in the distance. When he's in the actual gameplay, you see him from behind. They do all this stuff to cover up his face, and it's kind of unsatisfying. I wanted to see it, especially because this is him supposedly dying for the last time. Although I find it interesting that he kind of combines his power with her power, and that's how she's ultimately able to defeat Miranda. So in some kind of way, maybe his energy lives on, and his energy stays with her. Maybe this ghost writing on the walls, maybe there's a little bit more to that. But I can't help but feel that the ending is setting up Rose to be the character, despite that interview where they said they spoke against that. I like the emotion of, the loss again, because Village was moving so fast, you didn't really get the emotion of, a daughter losing her father, especially because we didn't know Rose. Rose was the baby. So I think it actually has a more emotional resonance in this ending than the OG version. So I really appreciated the emotional connection at the end, and seeing the father's grave, even that has more meaning. So again, I could honestly do without seeing the same cutscene again, but it is kind of cool. They're just pointing out that, like I said earlier, now we know what she meant when she said it to this guy, and the Evelyn thing. Now we know why she hates that. So it makes this scene have more context. But we would have had that if they didn't show it to us. We would have known that. I would have figured that out. But I honestly would have rather had a tease of Resident Evil 9 or something. Again, like this cutscene made me say Rose is going to be the next main character. And here it is, yet again, being the ending to the DLC. So we're at the same point story-wise. I still say Rose is the next main character. Maybe not the next game, but she's going to stay around. She's going to come back. Ethan's story, I don't think, is fully over. And we still have this question. I was like, it would have been cool. It would have made sense to replay this whole cutscene if we had something at the end, like if we knew who that guy was, or some type of hint, something that gives us some type of something to discuss and something to make theories about. So that was a little bit disappointing. So that's my review of Shadows of Rose. I enjoyed it. I was in the mindset that I was buying the DLC just for this, and the DLC was $20, and this is what I was mostly interested in. So I think it is worth that price because it's like $3 or $4. But I think it's a bit. If you can get it on sale, I would, because if you're not interested in third-person mode in the campaign, and I got to say, I was more interested in that in theory now that I have the ability to play it again. It just kind of feels like it's the same experience. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I'll feel differently about it and make a video. But I'm just not that into it. So, and Mercenaries was kind of meant to begin with, but now we have new characters with new abilities. But it's the same stages. I was kind of hoping that we would get some new stages. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Please correct me in the comment section down below, because I didn't invest that much time in it yet. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section. And if you're a Resident Evil fan and you want to see more reviews like this, definitely keep it locked on Shook Earth Gaming. Hit the sub button and all that. And if you're still listening, my main channel is Shook Earth Media. I'll link it in the description. And that channel, we cover movies and TV, and I'm trying to move the gaming content over here because it seems like different audiences. So if you're interested in TV reviews, we talk about Walking Dead, horror-oriented stuff, and I think it shows like that. So if you're interested in that, definitely check it out. But with that, it's been your boy Shuggy, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching, everybody. Peace out.